The film opens with a love story full of injustice and hatred between a tycoon's wife and a bodyguard. The story begins with an assassination attempt. Today, the tycoon's wife is busy shopping at a high-end fashion store. Just stepping out the door, she becomes the target of a sniper. The assassin aims directly at the lady's head, however, because the female staff standing in front moves, she gets shot. Fortunately, the lady's private bodyguard reacts in time, quickly shielding her. At this moment, the fountain in the square suddenly erupts, creating a curtain of water that blocks the assassin's view. Immediately afterward, a man wearing glasses appears to protect the lady. Seeing the assassination plan foiled, the assassin switches to using a machine gun. He aims at the fuel tank to create an explosion to finish off the lady. However, all his actions are seen through by the man. Taking advantage of the fountain erupting again, he pulls the lady to her car. Being the car of a tycoon's wife, its bulletproof ability is unquestionable. In the end, both safely leave the city center for a peaceful countryside. At this time, the lady has the opportunity to ask who the person who just saved her is. However, she has not yet received an answer when the car's engine suddenly overloads. The man has no choice but to pull over to the side of the road where there is a clearer view. However, as soon as she gets out of the car, the lady continues to ask him who he is. The man stammers, replying that he is just a passerby who happened to see her being assassinated and saved her. Of course, Wanso won't believe this explanation, but in the current situation, she has to pretend to trust him. Very quickly afterward, the man fixes the car. He even discovers a tracking device attached to the car. Seeing this, he immediately finds an excuse. We are being tracked, so we can't go back to the city for now. Being a tycoon's wife, Wanso is certainly no fool. She uses the excuse of borrowing his phone to probe the man's reaction. Seeing Wanso wanting to call the police, Do-yoon uses the excuse of the police having a mold to refuse in a reasonable way. Then he takes Wanso to his house. Contrary to Wanso's thoughts, Do-yoon's house is not luxurious but very ordinary. Even the interior decoration is no different from an ordinary person's house. What makes Wanso completely reassured is that Do-yoon not only gives her the phone but also lets her freely contact her relatives, then leaves her in the living room and goes to take a shower. This action shows that he has no intention of holding her captive. 10 minutes later, Do-yoon walks out with a wet body. His muscular muscles make Wanso inevitably tremble. Seeing his unbandaged wound, she immediately comes forward to help bandage it. After many years, this is the first time she has had close contact with a man other than her husband. However, contrary to Wanso's thoughts, Do-yoon only politely takes a wet towel for her to wipe the stain on her face, then uses gallant and attentive actions to narrow the distance between the two. Upon hearing that Do-yoon wants to take her to the embassy, Wanso feels an indescribable disappointment in her heart. Not long after, the vice president of the corporation, who is also Wanso's husband, arrives at the embassy. However, no matter what Yong-gook asks, Wanso remains indifferent. It wasn't until the captain of the bodyguard team asked about the witness that her eyes lit up. Unfortunately, the captain was a step too late. After giving his statement, Do-yoon quietly left. But when he sees the signature on the statement, the captain can't help but be surprised. It turns out that Do-yoon is not only the captain's junior but also the talent he has always wanted to recruit. Even 2 days ago, the two made an appointment to meet. Now they meet again in an assassination attempt. All these coincidences are hard to explain. On the other side, Wanso still holds a press conference despite her husband's objections. In front of the press, she asserts that she is being terrorized by hostile forces for her charitable activities. However, she is not afraid and will continue to pursue her ideals. This action helped Wanso successfully attract public attention. However, both Yong-gook and the chairwoman, Wanso's mother-in-law, expressed outrage. Her mother-in-law even smashed the TV and uttered the horrifying words, "Get rid of her." The next day, Wanso and her husband attended a family party. The couple was very famous in the industry because Yong-gook was not only the heir to the conglomerate but also Korea's outstanding young man of the year, while Wanso was not only a golf champion but also a famous charity angel. Even a certain prison leader donated 500 billion won to her. But the party was only halfway through when her sister-in-law suddenly winked at Yong-gook, and the two left the hall together. Even when facing the dissuasion of the captain of the bodyguard team, Yong-gook said that they only needed 5 minutes. But after only 3 minutes, the nephew suddenly came to Wanso saying that he missed his mother and was sleepy. Inevitably, Wanso could only go out to look for them. The captain of the bodyguard team wanted to stop it but was helpless. He could only arrange for a new bodyguard to follow in case the tycoon's wife lost control. However, inside was the living area of the families in the corporation. The bodyguard could only stand guard outside. As soon as Wanso stepped into the room, a burst of heat hit her face. Then when she turned on the light, the intimate scene between her husband and sister-in-law appeared before her eyes. Facing her sister-in-law's explanation, Wanso only replied with one sentence. "Sister, it's not what you think. The two of you shouldn't be caught like this." The meaning of this sentence was too clear, but the sister-in-law still stubbornly asked, "You've known for a long time, haven't you?" "Since when?" Wanso didn't answer directly but was only angry that they didn't distinguish the situation, because there were still many reporters outside. Does it matter? For her sister-in-law, it really mattered, but now was not the time to explain, because the party had entered the dancing part. Facing her husband's dirty hand, Wanso did not hesitate to put her hand on it. In the admiring applause of everyone, the husband and wife smiled and stepped onto the dance floor, dancing the dance of a model couple. As soon as the party ended, Wanso rang the doorbell of her mother-in-law's room. Unsurprisingly, the person who opened the door was her sister-in-law. "Mother is waiting for you." Facing her mother-in-law, the chairwoman of the corporation, from the standing posture of the two, it was clear to see the disparity in power. "You, get out." "Mom, I have something to say too." "I told you to get out." Seeing that only the two of them were left, Wanso stopped pretending. She turned and walked straight to the bar to pour herself a drink. Her mother-in-law angrily threw the newspaper at her. Wanso immediately retaliated by throwing her glass and all the other glasses on the bar. "Are you crazy? If you have something to say it quickly. I heard you've known for a long time." "Do you mean you've also known for a long time?" "That's right." Her sister-in-law was arranged by her mother-in-law to seduce her son, with the aim of letting Wanso find out, then proactively file for divorce. At that time, she would rely on the prenuptial agreement to completely control the subsidiary of the corporation. Because before he passed away, the former chairman gave the most valuable subsidiary to Wanso. Now, even if her mother-in-law wanted to take a penny from it, she still needed Wanso's consent. However, unlike her calm exterior, in the darkness, Wanso could only drink to relieve her sorrow, even dismissing all the bodyguards. When she staggered from drunkenness, the new bodyguard Duyun appeared just in time. Why aren't there any bodyguards? After all, the two of them had a wide gap in status. Wanso didn't want to be touched by him. However, when she stepped into the elevator, the bodyguard didn't seem to intend to follow. But as soon as the elevator door closed, Wanso pressed the open button and looked at him, signaling him to come in. The bodyguard reluctantly followed her upstairs, then followed her to the door. It was unknown whether Wanso did it on purpose or because she was really drunk, but when she looked for her room card, she dropped everything on the floor. Seeing this, Duyun had no choice but to hold her against the wall and pick up the room card for her. At this moment, Wanso suddenly blurted out, "Should I just sleep with you tonight?" Seeing that the bodyguard didn't respond, Wanso had to invite him again. "Do you want to sleep with me?" Frustrated by the bodyguard's ignorance, Wanso disappointedly walked into the room, then pretended to fall to trick him inside. However, the room card accidentally fell out. At the same time, Wanso's husband got angrier and angrier. Taking advantage of the alcohol, he was about to knock on Wanso's door. At this time, the bodyguard was holding Wanso against the wall. In the instant their eyes met, the temperature in the room began to rise. But just as the temperature was about to peak, the husband suddenly knocked on the door. Fortunately, their clothes were still neat. As the bodyguard was about to open the door, Wanso pulled him back and signaled him to be quiet. The husband quickly saw the room card on the floor. As he was about to pick it up, the captain of the bodyguard team suddenly appeared. "Let me." After helping him pick up the room card, the captain stood in front of the door, preventing the husband from entering. "She drank too much tonight." Seeing that the vice president had left, the captain turned and slid the room card into the slot. It's unclear whether he had discovered the secret of the two. A moment later, Wanso was sitting on the bed in her pajamas, while the bodyguard came out of the room, but his clothes were still neat, not messy at all. The next day, they had to return to Korea. Wanso and the bodyguard didn't communicate with each other, not even glancing at each other. As the wife of the head of a top conglomerate, their main residence was located on the side of a mountain. It took more than 10 minutes to drive from the main gate to the main villa. As a new bodyguard, the captain not only arranged for Duyun to stay in the basement closest to the stairs but also assigned him to be Wanso's personal bodyguard. It's unknown whether it was intentional or coincidental, but while cleaning up, Duyun accidentally dropped his photo frame, inside which was a memory card. At this time, he remembers his friend's dying words, with difficulty uttering the two words, photos. Could this be the reason why his friend was murdered? Duyun hurriedly plugged the memory card into the computer. There were only 3 videos inside. He randomly opened one. It was the surveillance video of the mansion. After fast-forwarding, a man appeared. It was the former chairman of the corporation. There's something wrong with the death of the former chairman. That's why his friend was murdered because of this video. After discovering her husband's bad deeds, Wonso could still calmly meet his mistress. It turned out that she had known about it since the first time the woman brought the child over. It's worth noting that the first time Wonso met her sister-in-law was not long after their marriage. Since then, Wonso had to endure and give birth to a son for her husband. If their son hadn't died in a skiing accident, the relationship between the two wouldn't have become so cold. However, Wonso underestimated her sister-in-law's determination to usurp her position. Not only was she unable to persuade her to live abroad, but she was also revealed a shocking secret. Do you know why he married you? Wonso and her husband met while doing charity work, so she always thought that the two fell in love at first sight. Her sister-in-law told her that at that time, her husband was not only having an affair with her but also had a public girlfriend. However, that girlfriend died of an allergic reaction to wheat flour, so her husband was forced to go to Africa to pursue Wonso, who was known as the charity angel, in order to restore his reputation. What surprised her sister-in-law was that after hearing this, Wonso didn't show any surprise or pain. Are you going to get a divorce? No, you just make up your mind to be a mistress for the rest of your life. Unwilling to give up, her sister-in-law hurriedly ran to see her mother and told her everything. After hearing this, her mother-in-law pondered. After all, she deliberately brought the mother and daughter back to Korea, not because she wanted to maintain the family line, but because she wanted to drive Wonso away. Now that the plan had backfired, she kicked her daughter-in-law out and called the lawyer. After confirming that the child was of their bloodline, she immediately asked the lawyer to arrange a family photo shoot. Tomorrow we'll end all of this. The next day, the location for the family photo shoot was carefully prepared. Wonso felt sad while putting on her makeup. No one around could help her. At this time, she just wanted to find someone to confide in. When she arrived at the photo shoot location and saw the little boy sitting on the chair, she immediately understood everything. Her mother-in-law wanted the mother and daughter to be recognized as official members of the family. She turned to look at her husband, only to see him looking at her with a smug expression. Immediately afterward, she questioned her mother-in-law. Was it because she didn't allow her to use the subsidiary's money that she had to make the family affair so public? As expected, her mother-in-law changed the subject to Wonso's deceased son. She said that at the time, it was Wonso who didn't want to announce the news of her son's death, only telling everyone that he was studying abroad. Now was the right time to replace him. Her mother-in-law's words sent chills down Wonso's spine. Not only did she want the child to be recognized as a descendant, but she also wanted Wonso to become his mother. No matter what, we still have to take a family photo today. Helpless, Wonso could only sit down in front of the camera with a dejected expression. What made Wonso determined to fight back was that her mother-in-law put the child in her son's room and even told the housekeeper to throw away all the things that her son had used. Although Wonso just wanted to be alone, the pain and anger made her drive very fast. As soon as she left the door, she almost caused an accident. Fortunately, the bodyguard, Do-yoon, arrived in time. He didn't say a word but got in the car. Even though Wonso asked him to get out of the car, he pretended not to hear because his mission was to protect her. I just want to be alone. Then pretend I'm not human. You're here alone. It must be said that the relationship between the two was not merely that of master and servant. Wonso had to compromise. In fact, nothing happened that night. But after being rejected 3 times in one night, Wonso wanted to fire Do-yoon. Reluctantly, Do-yoon had to reveal his purpose. He said that his friend was murdered a few months ago. The culprit was the one who tried to assassinate Wonso the day before. Although the assassination attempt failed, the culprit would certainly not give up, so Do-yoon chose to protect Wonso, in fact, to take revenge. From now on, don't trust anyone, just stay by my side, I will protect you. Now, Do-yoon kept his promise. But when he saw Wonso using her hand to wipe off the sand, Do-yoon suddenly squatted down and used his handkerchief to help her clean it. This action was clearly overstepping the line, so when Wonso came to her senses, she immediately reminded Do-yoon to fulfill his duties as a bodyguard. Today, Wonso didn't want to go back to her husband's house, so she went to a villa in the mountains. But when the two stopped the car, they saw Wonso's husband inside. At this moment, the husband also recognized the intimacy between the two. So as soon as Wonso stepped in the door, he unexpectedly offered to have more children with her and said he loved her. It must be said that this husband had a very low EQ. Even if they were sweet nothings, he should have considered the circumstances and timing. His action was no different from humiliating himself. He even tried to force himself on Wonso. Seeing this, Do-yoon rushed in to restrain Won-soo's husband. It must be known that this action was not allowed because Won-soo's husband was the vice president of the corporation, and he was just a bodyguard, having no right to intervene in the conflict between the couple. Fortunately, Won-soo said in time that she wanted to leave, so Do-yoon was not beaten by her husband. However, after this incident, the husband clearly showed jealousy toward Do-yoon. With nowhere else to go, Won-soo could only return to her husband's house. After a night of thorough thinking, she finally made a bold decision. I want to spread rumors that the vice president of the corporation has another woman and a 10-year-old son outside. The next day, Won-soo's mother-in-law discovered that Do-yoon was a formidable opponent in judo because this was the first time she had lost to someone. Until now, no matter how strong a man was, he couldn't withstand a single blow from her because she possessed Korea's top-notch judo skills. This result surprised all the other bodyguards. Unexpectedly, the chairwoman was not angry but reached out and beckoned Do-yoon to come closer. Looking at the expressions of the other bodyguards, it could be seen that Do-yoon was not the first bodyguard she had groped. Do-yoon didn't care about that at all, he immediately pushed her away. However, this made her even more excited. Let's spar often from now on. Even after dismissing her assistant, she couldn't help but sniff the scent on Do-yoon's sleeve. However, her good mood immediately disappeared when she saw this photo. The woman who bumped into her in the photo was none other than her daughter-in-law, Won-soo, and Do-yoon happened to be her daughter-in-law's personal bodyguard. However, before she could take down Do-yoon, the assistant hurriedly ran in to announce the news. This new piece of information shocked her even more than the bumping incident, which was that her eldest son was having an affair, and the identity of his illegitimate child had been exposed. It was too late to cover it up. The house was surrounded by reporters. Won-soo's husband hurriedly turned the car around when he saw this. As Won-soo predicted, the first person the mistress turned to for help was her. Take care of this quickly. Everything has been exposed, you should be happy, shouldn't you? They've posted pictures of me, now I don't even dare to go out. That's right, not to mention how complicated a conglomerate family was, this woman's IQ alone was enough to make people shake their heads. She even wanted Won-soo to hold a press conference, admitting that she was not the third party. At this time, her mother-in-law called Won-soo over to discuss a solution. Unexpectedly, the mistress had quickly rushed in first. She even casually sat down on the chair. You, get out, I didn't call you. Why? I'm the one involved, my pictures have been spread everywhere. Although her mother-in-law had spoken, she still refused to give up. Before leaving, she kindly advised her mother-in-law to let Won-soo hold a press conference. This action made the eldest son show a look of pain and regret for his blind choice. After sending the naive mistress away, the lawyer advised them to keep silent because time could erase everything. However, Won-soo would not sit still and wait for death because she released this news not only because her mother-in-law wanted the child to be recognized as a descendant, but also because she wanted her to be the child's mother. So, as soon as she walked out of her mother-in-law's room, she asked the assistant to arrange a press conference, scheduled for the next day. However, the assistant was also her mother-in-law's spy. The next day, when all the reporters were seated, her mother-in-law took Won-soo away to meet with other ladies. Fortunately, the bodyguard had everything prepared. When Won-soo excused herself to go to the bathroom, he quickly took her to the press conference. At the same time, her mother-in-law also learned that Won-soo had left. She hurriedly turned on the TV, and it turned out that she saw Won-soo answering about the rumors. Regarding these rumors, my answer is that they are not true. This denial immediately caused the whole room to explode. Most reporters thought she was lying, but after Won-soo's next words, they all fell silent. Let me tell you the truth. The child that everyone heard about is actually the son of my late father-in-law. He is the son of the late chairman, whom everyone knows. Needless to say, her mother-in-law was so angry that she laughed, while Won-soo's husband was overjoyed. However, the most miserable person was the mistress. Although she didn't have a high IQ, she quickly realized that she had become the mistress of a 70-year-old man, and her mother-in-law had become the former Won-soo. Upon arriving home, Won-soo ignored the mistress's nonsense as she tried to assert herself and directly led her to a row of rooms. Then she sternly warned her that her scope of activities was only within this room. She was not allowed to participate in family meals, to make her aware of her position. Although Won-soo had won a glorious victory on the surface, her heart was broken. Fortunately, even if she went jogging, the bodyguard would follow her. She also took this opportunity to pour out her heart. It turned out that the reason she refused to divorce was not because she was reluctant to part with the wealth of the conglomerate family, but because before he passed away, the late chairman asked her to put her fingerprint on a tablet and begged her to persevere until the fingerprint could be used. During this time, no matter what happened, she must not get a divorce. However, the late chairman did not specify when the fingerprint would be used. Because of her promise to the deceased, she insisted on not getting a divorce. After pouring out her heart, Wansu's mood was much better, but when her mother-in-law called her over, her mood plummeted again. Do you know that your mother is being held in an unstable mental hospital? In an isolation ward. There was no doubt that the person who could do this was none other than Wansu's brother, but it was certainly her mother-in-law who was behind it. The next day, under her brother's guidance, Wansu arrived at a hospital on top of a mountain, but it seemed that only her mother was here, even with 3 nurses and 3 guards. As she walked toward her mother's room, the bodyguards waited outside. However, as soon as Wansu entered the room, she let out a piercing scream. It turned out that despite their poor family background, Wansu's mother always forced her daughter to practice golf and even borrowed money from loan sharks so that her daughter could go to the US to compete. Just like that, Wansu went to a foreign country alone. 10 years later, the name Wansu was announced at the golf legend. But right after receiving the bonus with her assistant, she was stopped by debt collectors because her mother had been arrested for gambling debts. At that time, Wansu felt very hopeless. Over the past 10 years, she had earned no less than 10 billion won, but her mother had squandered it all on gambling. After paying off the debt with the prize money she had just received, Wansu wrote a letter severing ties with her mother and decided to donate all the money she would earn in the future. Until her husband, the conglomerate heir, got caught up in a scandal, he was forced to go to Africa to pursue Wansu, who was known as the charity angel, in order to salvage his reputation. But her powerful mother-in-law wouldn't allow Wansu to have any blemishes. She secretly collaborated with Wansu's brother, locking her mother in an unstable mental hospital. Currently, Wansu's mother is dying, so her mother-in-law only now reveals her whereabouts to Wansu. Upon reuniting with Wansu, the mother breathed her last. What's even more hateful is that her mother-in-law deliberately arranged an important meeting with a business partner for tomorrow in order to prevent Wansu from attending her mother's funeral. Wansu objected, but she threatened, "If this deal fails, you will also be locked up there quietly, just like your mother." Wansu had no choice but to compromise. So, while her brother cremated her mother, Wansu was sitting in a luxurious hotel with her mother-in-law, putting on an act in front of her sister-in-law's father. Accustomed to rising above adversity, Wansu did not give up easily. That afternoon, she went to the bodyguard's quarters and asked Do-yoon to take her to her mother's burial site. Do-yoon, blinded by love, not only ignored the mistress's orders, but he even took the liberty of removing the tracking device in the car. He even suggested turning off the phones. So as soon as the two left the villa, the conglomerate family was in an uproar. Everyone rushed to find their whereabouts. Wansu and Do-yoon went to her old house to reminisce about the past. Do-yoon took this opportunity to embrace Wansu. This scene was captured by someone and sent to her mother-in-law. Although the two did not spend the night out, as soon as they returned to the villa, the security guard informed Do-yoon, "The chairwoman wants to see you." Do-yoon knew he had caused a disaster, but he was also helpless. Without a doubt, a storm was waiting for Wansu and Do-yoon. As soon as Do-yoon entered the door, he was attacked by Yong-gook. "You're fired. Where's the captain? Fire him right away." After he finished speaking, he turned to his wife. Seeing that Wansu didn't react, he was so jealous that he was fuming. Although she was the most formidable, her mother-in-law remained silent and led the captain of the security team to the office. Wansu will object to the bodyguard's dismissal. Whatever her reason is, just do as she says. This was the depth of the head of the family. In order to keep the bodyguard, she even called her eldest son over, slapped him in the face, and continuously physically assaulted him as if she was angry that he couldn't control his emotions. In fact, she wanted Wansu and the bodyguard to really have an affair. Afterward, Wansu would be kicked out of the family in disgrace. But she couldn't tell her son about this purpose, so she used the excuse that her son was insecure and afraid of a bodyguard taking his wife. "Go see him, tell him that the vice president is very sorry and give him some medical money." Wansu being able to survive under her mother-in-law's authority and hold on to the most valuable subsidiary, she was certainly not someone to be bullied. The next day, with just 2 phone calls, she had finished a cosmetics advertisement. When the advertisement was broadcast widely, her sister-in-law and her husband came to confront her. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" It turned out that the meal that her mother-in-law had arranged with her sister-in-law's father that day was for the purpose of collaborating on the release of a new cosmetic line. But a day before the new product launch, Wansu's advertisement was unexpectedly broadcast widely, attracting all consumers, causing her sister-in-law's father's company to lose hundreds of billions of won. At this time, Wansu's husband also rushed over. The battle officially became 2 against 2. Ms. Wanso, what was your intention in doing this? How dare you? You have to call her sister-in-law. Although his private life was a mess, when faced with these matters, Yong-guk was not weak. Let's go, don't talk to this kind of woman anymore. Mind your words. The fact that Yong-guk defended his wife made his sister-in-law very dissatisfied. She immediately revealed a secret of the conglomerate family. It turned out that she was originally the one engaged to Yong-guk. But because he was caught in a scandal, she had to turn to marry his younger brother and let him join her family. And the younger brother's secret girlfriend at the time, wanting to set foot in the conglomerate family, switched to having a child with the older brother. That was just their relationship. If you include the mother-in-law's relationship, the younger brother was actually the illegitimate son of her and the lawyer. Yong-guk had known about their relationship for a long time. Seeing that her eldest son was about to fight with his younger brother to protect Wanso, the murderous look in the mother-in-law's eyes was evident. The next day, after Wanso had just finished her charity work, she was followed by a swarm of drones. Fortunately, a deer suddenly appeared on the road. The driver was startled and swerved to avoid it, scaring Wanso. Do-yoon was dissatisfied, so he switched places with the driver. With his sharp instincts, he noticed something unusual as soon as the drones locked onto the car. Fortunately, Do-yoon was a skilled driver. He dodged half of the bullets by swerving the car, and even took advantage of the bridge to destroy 2 drones. However, because he was completely focused on the sky, he forgot to pay attention to the situation around the car. The next second, the car was attacked from the side and undercarriage by the drones. At this moment, the assassin also stopped controlling. She was none other than the bodyguard close to the chairwoman of the conglomerate. She even went closer to check to make sure everyone was dead. After seeing that everyone was unconscious, she swaggered away. But as soon as she left, the bodyguard, Do-yoon, unexpectedly woke up. He ignored the wounds on his body, rushed to the backseat, and rescued Wanso. Finally, just a second before the car exploded, he shielded Wanso. As for him, he was hit in the back by many fragments and fainted on top of Wanso. Fortunately, the metal shrapnel did not pierce deeply and did not damage any internal organs. But the bodyguard upstairs had witnessed the whole thing. A new assassination plot gradually formed in her mind. So when she saw Do-yoon being taken to the intensive care unit, she followed him. Waiting for all the nurses to leave, she was about to make her move when the eldest son of the conglomerate unexpectedly appeared. But Yong-guk's eyes were only fixed on Do-yoon, completely oblivious to her presence. Facing the man who had saved his wife twice, Yong-guk had very complicated feelings. The fact that the benefactor and his wife were too close made him uncomfortable. However, he left shortly after without doing anything. After making sure there was no one around, the bodyguard was about to go back to make her move, but she discovered that there was a camera right above her head. Having no other choice, she had to give up for the time being. At the same time, the chief of the police department is invited to the conglomerate's mountain villa. The one who greets him is none other than the villainous lawyer Han, Wansu's mother-in-law's lover. However, contrary to the gleeful reaction he imagined seeing someone in trouble, the chairwoman was extremely angry. She was furious that someone had overstepped their authority, ordering the chief to quickly arrest the culprit. No matter the cost, the perpetrator must be sentenced to death. But the one who sees the chief off is lawyer Han. Through his insinuations, he deliberately twists the chairwoman's words into wanting to find a scapegoat. Lawyer Han said that Wanso was once threatened by an extremist organization, and the culprit this time must be this organization as well. Although they couldn't find the real culprit through normal channels, Do-yoon was still secretly investigating. As soon as he woke up, he went to find his former colleague at the police station, asking for a copy of the surveillance video from the scene. At the same time, Yong-guk was also secretly investigating. He took advantage of his position as the vice president of the conglomerate, sending 50 people to investigate the surveillance footage overnight. The efficiency would certainly be higher than Do-yoon's. But before the two could track down the culprit, Wanso suddenly decided to go to Do-yoon's dormitory on her own. "Why are you here? The surveillance cameras will catch you. Only the housekeeper can see the surveillance footage, and she's not here." This was the first time the two had seen each other since leaving the hospital. Wanso suspected that the chairwoman was using her subsidiary to launder money, so she wanted Do-yoon to help her get the secret ledger from lawyer Han. From their actions, it could be seen that after the incident, their relationship seemed to have taken a step forward. The next day, through the surveillance camera, Do-yoon confirmed that lawyer Han was not at home, so he went to lawyer Han's house. But unfortunately, he didn't have the passcode. He had no choice but to go back to the kitchen and get lawyer Han's fingerprints from the water glass he had used. Coincidentally, there was an engraving machine in his dormitory. In no time at all, a pair of gloves with fingerprints was engraved. Then he successfully broke in. However, the safe not only required fingerprints but also a passcode, so he took off his watch and installed a camera inside, pointing it directly at the safe. But what he didn't expect was that his every move was seen by the bodyguard. She immediately informed Lawyer Han about this. But even though Lawyer Han hurried back, it was still too late. Do-yoon was long gone. Lawyer Han immediately checked the safe and found that the contents inside were still intact. He breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that Do-yoon hadn't taken anything. But when he turned his attention to the wine cabinet, he suddenly noticed that it wasn't tidy. It must be known that Lawyer Han had a severe case of OCD, so anything that was not neat and tidy was a problem. As expected, the ledger of the conglomerate's accounts was gone. At the same time, Do-yoon had just brought the ledger to Wonso when a group of people from the Seoul prosecutor's office suddenly barged in. Even a search warrant had been prepared in advance. Clearly, someone was setting them up. The conglomerate's accounts were originally flawless, yet Do-yoon deliberately brought the secret ledger here. Once these things were confiscated by the prosecutor's office, Wonso's brother would certainly become the scapegoat. A moment later, Lawyer Han began to act, releasing fabricated evidence of the intimate relationship between Wonso and the bodyguard, putting Wonso on the defensive. Then, he let the chairwoman speak up, saying that she didn't care if her daughter-in-law had betrayed her son or not because, as a woman, she understood. The point was that Wonso had the audacity to let the bodyguard steal the ledger. This time the conglomerate was under investigation. The bodyguard was certainly the one behind it. Upon hearing this, Wonso tried to explain that the bodyguard didn't have time to call the police, but Lawyer Han cleverly used his words to make everyone suspect him. "Do you believe bodyguard Do-yoon? Be careful not to be played by him." These words began to make Wonso suspicious because, after all, they hadn't known each other for very long. Afterward, the chairwoman emphasized that Do-yoon had graduated from the police academy with honors, indicating that he was an intelligent and capable person. This time, arresting Wonso's brother alone was the best evidence. "He won't arrest you because you're still useful to him. I'll take the ledger to you." However, how could Lawyer Han let her take the ledger to the chairwoman? So, as soon as Wonso left, he went to see Yong-guk's lover. This mistress had become a pawn of Lawyer Han because she was a greedy and calculating woman, always longing to become the eldest daughter-in-law of the conglomerate family. So, when she heard the news that Wonso's brother was being investigated, she informed the reporters. The next day, the news of the Charity Angel's brother being investigated spread rapidly across the media, causing the conglomerate's stock price to plummet. Immediately afterward, the chairwoman held a shareholders' meeting for everyone to find a solution to the crisis. However, as voiceless supporting characters, they couldn't come up with any feasible solutions, so in the end, they still had to rely on Lawyer Han. "We have to create a hot topic to distract the public, which is to publicize the affair between Wonso and the bodyguard." A moment later, Lawyer Han took Wonso to the chairwoman, then used the excuse of having Wonso take a photo shoot with her husband to divert public attention from her brother's scandal. "You can go there with the bodyguard first. The vice president still has something to take care of, so he might be a little late." It was clear to see that they wanted to give the two of them some time alone. Although Wonso also felt strange, she did not show any worry or fear, because last night while talking to the bodyguard, she had learned a shocking secret. All the slush funds had been transferred to the chairwoman's account. This meant that even if the conglomerate was investigated, her brother would not become a scapegoat. It was just that they didn't know Lawyer Han's purpose yet, so they decided to remain silent and watch the next development. The next day, the two went to a mountain villa in Busan for a photo shoot. On the way, passing by a lighthouse, Do-yoon wanted Wonso to relax, so he stopped the car. At this time, a gust of wind blew Wonso's scarf away. Do-yoon quickly grabbed it and gently wrapped it around Wonso. This romantic gesture brought them closer together, but they didn't know that a camera was secretly recording everything. The person holding the camera was the chairwoman's personal bodyguard, but she wasn't here on the chairwoman's orders, but rather at the behest of Lawyer Han. Her true purpose was a sinister plot. Late at night, the bodyguard snuck into the villa. Although Do-yoon was very vigilant, the villa was too large, and the other bodyguards had mysteriously disappeared. By the time he noticed the shadowy figure in the house, it was too late. The masked bodyguard had appeared in front of Wonso. Fortunately, Wonso had time to use the feather pillow next to her to defend herself, buying time for Do-yoon to come to the rescue. After telling Wonso to escape through the window, Do-yoon immediately fought the bodyguard. Thanks to his agility, he initially gained the upper hand. However, the opponent suddenly pulled out a secret weapon, seriously injuring Do-yoon. She was about to finish him off, but remembering lawyer Han's instructions to frame Do-yoon after killing Won-so, she left. Taking advantage of the bodyguard chasing after Won-so, Do-yoon forces himself up. The three of them chase each other all the way to the pier, where there is only one yacht docked. Won-so hides in the cabin, the bodyguard closely following behind. She only needs to bend down to find her. Knowing that she can't escape, Won-so risks it all and runs deeper into the cabin, finally hiding in a bathroom. However, just as she breathes a sigh of relief, she suddenly feels a chill from above. Looking up, she is horrified to see the other woman standing on the flimsy wooden plank above. It's unclear how strange the design of this yacht is, but Won-so has completely fallen into a trap. Seeing that Won-so has fainted, Do-yoon can't hesitate any longer. He picks up a weapon from the dining table and charges at the bodyguard because he understands that if he continues to hesitate, the woman he loves will die. After a fierce struggle, Do-yoon gains the upper hand. However, instead of quickly subduing the bodyguard, he wants to take off her mask. The bodyguard seizes the opportunity to break free from Do-yoon. Do-yoon continues to attack the bodyguard but fails. He is beaten black and blue by her. In the end, Do-yoon musters all his strength, kicking her into the sea. It has been almost 30 minutes since he was injured. Do-yoon has lost too much blood. His body can't move. He doesn't have enough strength to take Won-so back. In this critical situation, he decides to untie the anchor rope, sail the yacht far out to sea, and wait for the rescue team to arrive tomorrow. Not long after, he faints in the cockpit, falling unconscious. On the other side, the news of Won-so and the bodyguard's affair has been posted online. However, surprisingly, instead of questioning his wife, Yong-gook storms into his mother's office, questioning her why she had his wife followed, why she wanted to slander the family. Did she want him to get a divorce that badly? It turns out that the person who spread the rumor is none other than his own mother. Despite her son's exposure, she still uses motherly love as an excuse, but is refuted by him. I will never get a divorce. Won-so is not the kind of dirty person you are. It turns out that since he was a child, he had witnessed his mother having an affair with lawyer Han. She didn't even care about his existence, which made him completely lose faith in love. It was not until he went to Africa and met Won-so while doing charity work that he realized how good people could be. Even when he proposed to Won-so with a ring made of wood, she still accepted. But unfortunately, due to his mistake, their child died before birth. Since then, Won-so had completely closed herself off from him. Nevertheless, he still silently stayed by her side. Whenever something happened to Won-so, he was the one who worried the most. He even secretly took care of his mother-in-law's funeral when she passed away. However, no matter how hard he tried to hold on, Won-so still wouldn't give him a chance. Now, his mother, wanting to drive Won-so away, wanted to ruin her reputation. This made him unable to stay calm. The next person he wanted to find was not his wife, but lawyer Han, the mastermind behind his mother. Facing this mastermind, he did not hide but frankly exposed two shocking secrets. The first secret, his father's death was not due to a heart attack during intimacy as rumored, but was murdered by someone sent by lawyer Han. The second secret, everything lawyer Han was doing was to prepare for his own son, Yong-gook's half-brother, to inherit the conglomerate. At this time, lawyer Han realized that the biggest threat was not his daughter-in-law, but the eldest son who had been pretending to be a fool all this time. But now it was too late because Yong-gook also had his limits. Once someone dared to touch his wife, he would make their life a living hell. Do you know why my mother hates you so much? It's because she only sees you as a servant. Giving birth to a servant's child was the shame of her life. After saying that, he was slapped in the face by lawyer Han. However, Yong-gook was not angry because in their family, hitting someone was considered the most foolish act. Only losers resorted to violence. Not stopping there, Yong-gook revealed that his brother knew about his and their mother's secret. His brother knew who his real father was, yet he still treated lawyer Han like a servant. His words were like salt in lawyer Han's wounds. Before leaving, he did not forget to warn him. Whether it's you or your son, if you dare touch Won-so again, I will personally take care of you. No matter the reason, I will eliminate both of you. After dealing with the two masterminds, he went to the wine cellar where bodyguard Do-yoon was being tied up. Yong-gook said that he wanted a fair confrontation with Do-yoon. However, as soon as the captain of the bodyguard team left, he pointed the gun at Do-yoon's head. What stage have you and Won-so gotten to? Clearly, as a man, he was very concerned about his wife's relationship with Do-yoon. However, through Do-yoon's expression, he knew that they hadn't crossed the line. But even if they hadn't, he wouldn't allow anyone to hurt Won-so, so the focus of the following questions was Do-yoon's purpose in approaching her. Do-yoon also confessed honestly. He approached Wanso to investigate the person who had murdered his friend, and that person was also the one who had tried to assassinate her. Wanso is my woman. All you need to do is protect her. What are you doing? In fact, Yong-guk had no intention of killing Do-yoon because, after all, he had saved his wife several times. But what surprised him the most was that when Do-yoon was threatened with a gun, Wanso's first reaction was to shield him. Wanso said that she had lied to Do-yoon, but she asserted that Do-yoon was not in love with her. Yong-guk pleaded with his wife to be rational because Do-yoon had approached her to avenge his friend. Wanso's actions made him feel unfair, but how could love be fair? The only comfort was Wanso's affirmation that she had never suspected that her husband was behind the assassination attempts because she knew that he would never harm her. That little bit of trust from his wife made Yong-guk's anger vanish because Wanso's trust was the most precious thing he had. The embrace after 5 years of estrangement made him feel much warmer. With less than 2 days left until the day the late chairman's will was to be announced, it turned out that before he passed away, he had secretly gone abroad to make a will, stipulating that it would be announced on his 70th birthday, whether he was alive or dead. While waiting, lawyer Han tried everything to contact the lawyer who drafted the will. But whether it was through threats or enticements, the other party was unmoved. On the day the will was announced, the first to arrive was the youngest son and his wife, who was also lawyer Han's biological son, followed by the lawyer and the eldest son and his wife. As if to punish lawyer Han, before announcing the will, the lawyer said in English that she would read the entirety of it in English, then asked if anyone needed an interpreter. The chairwoman immediately replied fluently in English, saying that everyone understood English, so no interpretation was needed. Unexpectedly, the lawyer suddenly switched to speaking in Korean. However, that was the only relaxing moment at the announcement, because the content of the will that followed caused a stir. First was the amount of secret funds considered inheritance, up to 18 trillion won. Note that it was trillion won. Next was the beneficiary of this 18 trillion won, none other than the charity fund named after his eldest daughter-in-law. The 18 trillion won is kept at UBS Bank in Switzerland, and only Wanso can withdraw it in person. It wasn't long before the notebook recording all illegal transactions related to the current chairwoman was exposed. Therefore, as soon as he got the notebook, lawyer Han immediately called the police and ordered the chairwoman's bodyguard to kill Wanso's brother. However, what he didn't expect was that the scene was recorded by bodyguard Do-yoon. He even stabbed the bodyguard in the back. Although he had let the bodyguard escape, as soon as he returned home, Do-yoon rushed to find her, even bringing a stun gun. She was the chairwoman's personal bodyguard, proving that she was a very capable fighter, but the wound on her back had weakened her considerably. After only 2 rounds, Do-yoon pinned her against the door and tore her shirt open to check for injuries. After confirming that she was the assassin, Do-yoon showed no mercy, hitting her hard on the head, knocking her unconscious, unable to resist. At the same time, the chairwoman was arrested by the police for embezzlement. Witnessing this scene, lawyer Han, her right-hand man, stood by, trying to hide his excitement. But things happened so fast that just as lawyer Han was about to breathe a sigh of relief, he saw the bodyguard being arrested. A bad feeling washed over him. Afraid that the bodyguard would expose him as the mastermind, he hurriedly ran to the backyard and dug up an iron box buried under the ground. Inside was the gold bar that his youngest son had used to kill the previous chairman. On the gold bar was not only the blood of the previous chairman but also his son's fingerprints. Afterward, lawyer Han brought the gold bar to the police station to see the chairwoman. "I've been waiting to meet the eloquent lawyer. Why are you only here now?" Facing her accusation, lawyer Han said nothing, only placed the gold bar on the table, and shamelessly said that this was evidence showing that her youngest son had killed his father. If she didn't want her youngest son to go to jail too, she had to confess to the crime of hiring someone to kill someone. A few short sentences, but containing earth-shattering information, made the chairwoman unable to believe her ears. Only now did she know that the person who had repeatedly tried to kill her eldest daughter-in-law, the person who had concealed the truth about her husband's death, the person who had framed her and put her in jail, was none other than lawyer Han. Yet she had given birth to a son for him. "Are you crazy? Dong Min is your son too." Everyone knew that even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its own cub, yet lawyer Han nonchalantly retorted, did she want to make their relationship public, to let the whole world know that she had an illegitimate child with a servant? A few short sentences were enough to make the chairwoman completely collapse. To protect her son, and also to save face, she finally gritted her teeth and confessed to the crime of hiring someone to kill someone. At the same time, Yong-guk pulled his brother's wife into the room. He didn't say a word and directly opened the 2 safes. Inside were many gold bars and bonds. "This is all for you. The purpose of his sister-in-law was very simple. She just wanted to marry into a rich family to enjoy a luxurious life. But when this huge amount of wealth was laid out before her eyes, she suddenly panicked because this 100 billion won was the amount Jong-guk had accumulated over the years, which was also all that he currently had. The fact that he handed it all over to her, apart from wanting her to take good care of his son, also meant that he had foreseen the danger. But Wonso doesn't love you, don't you feel it's unfair? I know, although I'm not resigned to it, it's the truth. At the same time, Jong-guk's brother was being forced to divorce by his wife. The reason was not only because his mother, the chairwoman, had been arrested, but also because he was no longer useful, and because he had arbitrarily used his wife's family's money to buy a large number of company shares. Of course, Jong-guk's brother was not a pushover. He directly tore up the divorce papers in front of everyone and declared that he would take over the inheritance today. After saying that, he rushed back to the villa. As soon as he entered the house, he dismissed all the maids, then went down to the basement to get his hunting rifle. At this moment, Lawyer Han saw the maids leaving. He immediately called the housekeeper and found out that his son was about to lose his cool. After hanging up, he hurriedly went downstairs. At this time, Wonso was about to go out. Coincidentally, Jong-guk also came downstairs to get some wine. Right at this moment, his brother appeared behind him. Wonso was about to go out when she heard a gunshot. Fortunately, the bullet only hit the wall. At this time, Lawyer Han also appeared in time. But Jong-guk was not afraid because he had arranged everything so that the father and son would pay. It was also considered the last thing he would do for Wonso. Like father, like son, give me the gun. I told you not to worry, I'll take care of it myself. Let dad shoot him. These words made Jong-guk's gaze turn serious as he looked at Lawyer Han. He was a cold-blooded man. He certainly wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger, and his brother was mentally unstable. He didn't want Wonso to face such a time bomb. When Wonso ran into the villa, her brother had picked up the gun, and the next second, a gunshot rang out. The sight before them stunned everyone. Jong-guk was shot in the left chest. He was definitely not going to make it. But he still tried to get up, wanting his brother to take responsibility for his crimes. Seeing this, Wonso hurriedly ran to Jong-guk and called out, "Honey." These two affectionate words brought Jong-guk back from the brink of death. It had been 5 years since their son had passed away, and he hadn't heard her call him that. But this was only a flashback. After apologizing, he breathed his last. On the other side, having just said goodbye, Lawyer Han took action. He ordered his son to erase the surveillance footage and quickly leave the villa. Then he called the police and wiped his fingerprints off the gun because he wanted to frame Wonso. However, when the police arrived, the villa gates were locked, which meant that Lawyer Han's son was still inside. When bodyguard Do-yoon arrived, Wonso immediately told him that the murderer was her brother-in-law. Immediately, everyone in the villa was mobilized to find Lawyer Han's son. In the end, it was Do-yoon who discovered the anomaly because this was the bodyguard's room. Before she was taken away, her closet was not closed properly. As expected, the person hiding inside was Lawyer Han's son. "We need to secure the gunshot residue on his hands. Get me 2 plastic bags." This type of hunting rifle, when fired, would leave gunshot residue on the shooter's hand. This was crucial evidence in identifying the perpetrator. Based on the surveillance camera outside the villa, when the gunshot rang out, Wonso was standing in front of the door. There was no way she was the perpetrator. So Wonso was released on bail, and Lawyer Han's son was detained. However, Lawyer Han, the real mastermind, was still safe and sound. On the surface, there was no evidence linking him to the conglomerate's slush funds or the hiring of someone to assassinate Wonso. Moreover, since the direct heirs of the conglomerate were unable to take over, Lawyer Han was elected acting chairman by the shareholders. How is it? This position suits me very well, doesn't it? Do you really think you have it all? The reason Do-yoon could be so confident was because after Wonso's brother passed away, he had received a USB drive from her younger sister. It was said to contain evidence of Lawyer Han's accounting fraud, but this type of evidence could not be considered admissible in court. So, he snuck into Lawyer Han's house, placed the USB drive inside the safe, then reported it to the police. However, because they didn't know the passcode, the police could only take the entire safe away. As a result, they were only able to open it and retrieve the USB drive yesterday. Therefore, Lawyer Han hadn't even gotten comfortable in his position when the police arrived to arrest him on charges of accounting fraud and to investigate the incident of the bodyguard assaulting someone after the notebook exchange. From then on, all the bad guys got punished by the law. However, Lawyer Han's sentence wouldn't be long, so Wonso's mother-in-law, while on bail, went to prison to visit her youngest son. "I've seen the gold bar, don't trust Lawyer Han. The gold bar was certainly the murder weapon. The youngest son immediately understood how his mother knew about it. She told him about being coerced by lawyer Han, causing him to completely lose faith in his own father. The next day, as lawyer Han was sitting in the yard reading, his son suddenly came up to him. Although his son had touched lawyer Han's neck, he still wanted to confirm what his mother had said. Because of the delay, the police arrived in time to separate them. Now with a ticking time bomb like his son, lawyer Han's days ahead would certainly be turbulent. Would he be able to survive until his release? At the same time, bodyguard Do-yoon also submitted his resignation to Wonso because, after all, he had achieved his purpose in coming here. Moreover, Yong-guk had protected Wonso until his death. He knew that he and Wonso wouldn't have a future, so they parted ways amicably. A year later, as Wonso was doing charity work with the inheritance money, she suddenly heard someone calling her. Turning around, she saw Do-yoon, dressed in civilian clothes. "Long time no see. I don't need a bodyguard anymore. I'm not a bodyguard anymore, I'm here to volunteer."